The Israeli Security Cabinet has approved plans to expand its assault in Gaza and militarily occupy the entirety of the Gaza Strip. Israel has begun calling up tens of thousands of reservists. The army chief says the decision is aimed at intensifying pressure on Hamas. That is, despite growing calls from inside Israel for a deal that would bring Israeli captives home. Let's speak to Hamdah Salhut, who's reported extensively on Israel's war on Gaza, both in Israel and from Amman in Jordan. At this point, what exactly do we know?
Well, we know that this was a unanimous decision by the Israeli Security Cabinet last night to not only expand their operations within the Gaza Strip, but also to seize the entirety of the Gaza Strip. This is something that members of Netanyahu's right-wing government, the fringe voices, as we previously thought, this was their dream all along, to take over the Gaza Strip. But you have to remember that many of them didn't even leave Netanyahu's government when the ceasefire came into place because they were promised a, quote, absolute takeover of Gaza. So the Israelis are kind of redefining what their war goals here, because clearly after more than a year and a half of fighting, they haven't been able to contain Hamas. They haven't been able to defeat them. They haven't been able to ensure their own security. But more importantly to the Israeli public, they haven't been able to bring about the release of the Israeli captives. So with this plan, the new army chief of staff says that this is going to be the way to do that. But of course, there are going to be risks. And within Israel already, this is not popular, saying that the Israeli government is going after land grabs, prioritizing that and these right-wing sort of ideals over the lives of the captives still held in Gaza.
Yeah, there has been a shift, hasn't there? Because in the beginning, it was all about getting the captives back officially. And now, in the last few weeks, we've heard one of the far-right ministers, Bezalel Smotrich, say actually his priority is the land in Gaza. And then a couple days ago, we heard the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu echo that sentiment.
Well, if you've heard from these members of the far right, the ultra right within Israel, they've been saying since the start of the war, actually, that while they want the captives back, it's actually not their priority. Their priority is the destruction of Hamas. And while they do want to bring the captives back to Israel, it's not the main thing for them when it comes to their goals of the war. So they're redefining actually what's important to them. And now you have Benjamin Netanyahu with this plan to take over Gaza that the Israeli public is calling the, quote, Netanyahu-Smotrich plan to abandon the hostages. This is how the family members are receiving this. So there have been comments from the right wing previously. But just this morning, you have Smotrich, who said that it's time that the word occupation is not something that people are afraid of. It's time people start welcoming this kind of rhetoric. So it just goes to show you this sort of shift where before this was something on the far right that essentially Netanyahu was dismissing, saying that this is not going to happen. But this is what's becoming the line of the coalition.
Yeah, and a reminder to viewers that under international law, the Gaza Strip is occupied by Israel, was occupied by Israel even before they had boots on the ground. I mean, we know that the international law is very clear on that. Do we have any indication right now on what then? If they do, right, it's an if at this point, but if they do reoccupy the entirety of this strip, what then? To just keep it?
Well, it's a little bit unclear because this is a plan that's not going to come to fruition apparently for a few weeks. One Israeli source who leaked this entire plan says that they're kind of waiting for U.S. President Donald Trump to visit the region so they can get that extra support from him. You have the communications minister, Shlomo Karei, saying that along with the approval of these plans, now needs to come also the instillment of the voluntary migration plan of Palestinians, saying they need to kick all of the Palestinians out so that Israel can have this land. So there's that. But you also have fighting that's going to intensify as part of this plan. But the Israeli army chief of staff said that when he was sworn in, when he took over for his predecessor, saying that 2025 was definitely going to be a year of fighting. And according to this plan that was unanimously approved, it's going to start in the north. They're going to try to push as many Palestinians as they can to the south before they ultimately go to the central part of the strip and then the south. But what is their plan for the Palestinians? It's still unclear.
Which is absolutely the most important point here, because we talked about the land, but there are 2.3 to 2.4 million people living inside the Gaza Strip. And you reminded us that the far right of this government, which now appears to be the line of the entire government, says they should then be somehow removed or, as they say, voluntarily leave the Strip. Hamdah Salhut, thank you very much. Ori Goldberg is an Israeli political commentator, and he says a prolonged war in Gaza will not grant Israel security.
Netanyahu's government has committed, so has Netanyahu. He's all in, at least for now. But he has an opposition. That opposition is on the streets. Will that opposition be translated into a mass refusal to report for service? I'm not sure. I don't know if that'll be the case. But Israelis are beginning to experiment with saying no, not to Netanyahu, because remember, Israelis support Netanyahu's policy. They're not saying no to Netanyahu. They're saying no to that side of themselves that is used to bowing their heads before the instructions of the state, doing what is necessary, what is decreed as necessary by the government. More and more Israelis are starting to entertain the possibility. None of this has to do with the Palestinians, but it does have to do with the fact that a prolonged and expanded war in Gaza is seen as an effort that is not related to security. Security is the utmost foundational principle of Israel. It is above and beyond politics. This war is now seen as political, especially when its goal is being declared as the occupation of Gaza. That is very much settler parlance, and there are a lot of Israelis who are getting very angry when they hear this.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.